So, welcome everyone, and hope you are all having a lovely Thursday. My name's Sobanan, CEO at Breakthrough Social Enterprise, and today we are going to. This is quite a strong title for a slide deck, but please excuse the strength of the language. But we don't want to abandon the system. We want to make sure the system is good and works well. But we want to figure out how we can build our own levels of economic resilience and really achieve this idea of digital economic readiness, right? And understanding how building a business in the age of AI is fundamentally different to previous times in history for a number of reasons. I think when we think about building a business in sort of past, it was really around, specializing, or it was around this one big idea, and you would sort of work in that direction over a lifetime, over decades, and the hope would be that you'd one day get there. Whereas today, it's really about fluidity and flexibility and understanding that the world is changing in a way that I think if you asked anyone in government or anyone in corporations, or even ask people who work in the AI companies, people aren't really sure how it's all going to turn out. So how do individuals, communities, and families prepare throughout this? And that's what we're going to really cover over this hour. So first, let's recognize the cracks in the system and why we are seeing such chaos across the world right now, especially when we think about socially or economically. And we can first of all look at this idea of stability, right? Fundamentally, what we were told, like what I was told growing up, was you go to school, you go to university, and you get a job. And then after you get that job, you have a family, you buy a house, you do that, and that's how you guarantee yourself a good life. And fundamentally, that's changed, right? Like today, we see that predictable career trajectories don't exist. Like entry-level roles no longer exist within companies. Large corporates don't do their grad schemes anymore, or when they do degree apprenticeships, they only hire a specific number in. We're seeing the end of reliable pension schemes. I was at an AI conference a few weeks ago, and the government advisor for AI, so the AI advisor to Keir Starmer, was there, and she said in Silicon Valley, people laugh at you if you save for a pension. And the reason that people laugh at you if you save for a pension is because they believe that the world only has a 5 to 10 year time horizon before we automate absolutely everything. And these are people in the thick of it. And she said, I'm not that far along the spectrum of belief, so not someone who doesn't save at all for a pension, but I do believe that the time horizon for a fully automated society or government and corporations with AI at the center is way closer than we would normally like to think, right? And finally, secure employment contracts. The idea of having a single career over your lifetime has evaporated. My mom and dad have worked in their careers for about 28 years, 28 and 30 years. The longest I've had a role is my 2 and a bit years at Breakthrough. So it gives you an idea, right? And I'm 30 years old. And the fact that my longest career since I've graduated has been 2 and a bit years goes to show you how much it's changed. And we can see the idea of having one career for long periods of time is again becoming rarer. It doesn't matter if you're a doctor, a lawyer, or an accountant. This is definitely something that has changed. And the idea of linear progression, you do your time and then you end up becoming a partner, or you end up becoming very senior in your role. Again, this idea of defined hierarchies is changing. We're seeing flat hierarchy companies start to develop. And the idea of that, if you do the right things, you will get the right results. That is no longer the case. And it requires us to start to think about our careers and the way we choose this economic environment quite differently. Letting someone in. And then finally, playing it safe. Now, the idea of playing it safe, like my parents, again, like my advice from my parents, school, everything when I was growing up was avoid risk. Like you fundamentally should avoid risk as much as you can. And if you avoid risk, you are likely to succeed. The government will protect you, whether that's through the welfare state or whether that's through being able to find you a job through the job center. And there was safety in conforming to the norms of society. There was safety in not trying to stand out, not trying to do something too different. And a lot of these promises, we can call it the American dream, or we can just call it the promises of Western society. And we saw this decline in Europe much earlier than we saw it in the UK or the US. The UK, the US, that was massively pushed by technology and a variety of other political forces. But in Europe, youth unemployment is very high, especially in places like Spain, for example. And the reason youth unemployment is high is if you know you're not going to be paid much and you're going to have to stress out to work full time, Why would you choose to work full time when you could choose to live your life? And the key thing I want everyone to remember here is that you can make money over a lifetime, like money comes and goes, but time fundamentally is the only thing you can't make back. It's the only resource or balance that you actually don't know how much of it you have every day when you wake up in the morning, right? You could have 10 years left, 1 year left, 1 day, 2 hours, God knows, right? And maybe even God doesn't know. And that's the point, right? We have to recognize that playing it safe fundamentally means really ignoring the fact that our only real asset is time. Now, what is happening today in 2026? These forces have been going on for a while, but they feel accelerated today, and they feel like they're only getting faster. So we're seeing AI disruption, and we're seeing the idea of you have a law degree, so you can be a good lawyer changing, because now anyone, if they so wanted to their LLM and ask for advice on a legal issue that they're having or about how to navigate something that would have previously required expert advice. The idea of cognitive work. So, for example, in economies like the UK, where we were a knowledge-based economy and we were massively exporting that knowledge base to the world. So if you think about management consulting, if you think about the way finance works or law, like all of these things were essentially being disrupted by AI. And you can see job categories dissolving overnight. So where you had entry-level roles in a specific company, those roles are being automated. One of these really good videos in Silicon Valley from Y Combinator talks about how the startups of the future, or the startups of today, when people are building organizations, what they ask people to do is write down the tasks that they do day to day. So you're spending all day, every day, writing down the tasks you're doing alongside doing them. And then you're giving those instructions to a large language model or another AI model to actually do that. And what we're seeing is that a lot of human knowledge work is fundamentally algorithmic. So meaning that it is a fundamentally repeatable process. It's something that day in, day out, when you go to work, you're following the same rules, you're following the same processes. Career volatility, redundancies are being normalized. Again, talking about my parents, my dad was made redundant from his job of 28 years in December because the contract that TfL had with the company he worked for was given to another company who wanted to do more automations and have more technology integration. So this is affecting people up and down the country, across the world. And this idea of long-term stable employment is gone. So traditional security is gone because fundamentally our careers are what gave us our sense of self, our self-worth, our self-esteem came from the job title you held. So when someone comes up to you on the street, it's like, hey, how are you? What's your name? What do you do? And now that must drive anxiety in people. We saw unemployment rates reach record-breaking levels earlier this week. We see youth unemployment rising. And one of the things I would ask all of you to reflect on is this isn't an individual issue. This isn't people's lack of willingness or lack of ambition or lack of capability. This is fundamentally a socioeconomic issue. The incentives behind AI are completely different to incentives behind any other real economic revolution. Because for those of you who've been in my talks before, you'll know the number one cost in a business is people. Salary overheads are the number one cost base for any business in any part of the economy. So if you find a way to replace someone who is cost you 25 grand a year for £20 a month, it's a no-brainer if you're trying to maximize profit and reduce cost. We need to change that mindset, both as a society, as a culture, as people, to going, how do we increase productivity? Then we've got this idea of compressed skill cycles. So for anyone who, for example, someone in our marketing team took a 2-week holiday. In that 2-week holiday, he came back to a world where AIs can now rent humans. So has anyone seen this? AI renting humans? No, but I can't see anything. I'll show you guys. So yeah, rent a human AI using Claudebot actually is a fascinating thing, because like, here you go. So you can hire a human to do tasks for you as an AI agent. Only AI agents can actually do this. And then you can do anything from photo verifications, meetings, in-person errands, packages and pickups and deliveries. And yeah, it's only for agents, right? You know, AI now has a social media account. Again, like, when did that happen? That happened in the last few weeks. And what we're seeing is this rapid shift to a world where yeah, definitely scary, Tiffany. Like, we're seeing a rapid shift to a world where agents and humans, AIs and humans, are coexisting. They are coexisting the same reality. I was talking to a CEO yesterday about AI to AI communication, how we are going to, as business owners, let AI speak to one another because that's easier than humans speaking to one another with less friction. That has all happened in the last 6 months, less than that. The hiring a human thing happened in the last few weeks. It means that what took 10 years of training, of grit and hard work is happening in months, is happening in weeks. So these compressed skill cycles, how do you keep up to date? Saw a really good video as well of a guy who learned how to use Claude in 3 weeks, and he was invited to speak at a Claude conference. And it goes to show you that you can learn and pick up these tools quickly, but it's using your unique human element. So, your age, your background, where you're based in the country, and using that as the advantage in this market. And finally, one of the scariest things, I think we're seeing institutional fragility, whether that's in government and whether that's in corporates. We're seeing that large organizations cannot adapt quickly enough to these technologies. And we have to remember that it must be overwhelming for us as citizens, but imagine working in the government knowing that they want to reduce the civil service workforce by 10%, and knowing that once you start implementing AI, current estimates look like you can reduce civil service numbers by 33% with simple automations, administrative changes. And this goes to show that the way we have designed our institutions is not fit for this decade, for this century, and we have to really start to take a look at it. But how do we as individuals prepare? So the system currently was designed for predictability. We were all going to go to school, go get an education, learn a trade, get a job, get a pension, have a family and a mortgage in between, and then come out the other end. And that predictable life cycle, that predictable routine was what the previous version of the system was designed for. Now, the future rewards adaptability because no one knows what's coming next. And I think that's a real thing I want to emphasize to everyone on this call is, and anyone who does our programs, when you don't know what's coming next, the most honest thing you can do is focus on the present moment, focus on upskilling yourself, communicating that language, and human connection. That's fundamentally what's going to help us to move through this with, with the most luck at the end, most abundance at the end. And the reason I say human connection, because in a world where AI agents can run humans competing with one another, seeing each other as sort of opposing ends or enemies, is fundamentally an enemy of progress. So security not coming from employment, but coming from capability is key. So we have to think about things like the portfolio career. The portfolio career is the individual who goes and has multiple jobs over a lifetime or multiple jobs at the same time. So for example, you might have a freelance role doing marketing. You might have a customer service advisor role on the weekends. You might work as a driving instructor or a therapist in your spare time. And that portfolio career gives you capability because now you don't have a single point of risk. You don't have all your eggs in one basket. If one career fails, you have multiple to fall back on. And that's why I want you to really think about this. How do you increase your capability? Because I hear this time and time again on our programs and when I speak to people is, I just need that one job. Like if I get that job, everything will be okay. But the point is you could have that job for 6 months and that job could disappear. But does that mean you will no longer be okay? And the one thing I worry for people generally is where we have tied our self-esteem and our self-worth to our employment, it can be very dangerous for us as individuals because now we will see rampant mental health because we have a government and media companies telling you are lazy if you're unemployed. You are not pulling your weight. You don't deserve to be on XYZ benefit or universal credit if you're unemployed. And the reality is we're in a market where you could have a PhD, a master's, you could be someone who left school at 16 and struggling to find work, and that is okay. But how do you improve your capability through this and ensure you are growing day to day? So the thing I want you to really focus on is the goal of our programs fundamentally is to find people jobs, is to help people build businesses. But the real thing I care about as CEO is digital economic readiness. The ability to generate value, income, and leverage in a digital AI accelerated economy, regardless of the employer or platform. What does that mean? It means generating value. Can you do things that are worthwhile for other people? Simple as being able to have a conversation with someone that alleviates their mental health or the way they feel about something. That could be as small as cooking a cake for your next door neighbor. Value is fundamentally your ability to serve. Your income Again, simply cash. Are you able to generate cash? Are you able to hustle? Do you know how to sell things on eBay? Do you know how to buy and resell things on eBay? Do you know how to promote a product on social media? Can you create content? Can you use an AI tool to build a web app so you could sell that to an SME in your local area? These types of questions are what will allow you to develop income. And then finally, leverage. Leverage exists in many forms. If I told you that my biggest career leverage in my life so far was me ending up in prison at 21, you would probably think that I was a little bit crazy. But the point is that was my biggest point of leverage, because when I went into job interviews and I said, oh, so I was studying medicine, ended up in prison for a conspiracy to supply cannabis, and now I did a biochemistry degree and I'm building this business and doing this, they were like, oh, wow, that's quite like a cool story. Like, you've got an interesting story there. And that became leverage. Every one of us has leverage in our stories. Everyone has leverage in their human experience. You have leverage in the relationships around you, the difficult things you've been through, the people you've met, the adventures you've had. How do you leverage that in a world where everyone, not about conforming anymore? It's about how do you stand out and how do you put your unique sense of self into the world, into the digital ether, so people can understand. People always talk to me about age as a thing, and I get it. Age can be a barrier in this employment market, but it's also one of those things to recognize that also gives you a very unique perspective. Whenever I speak to someone who's older than me, I'm always so curious to hear their perspective on AI or technology or the development, because I was 13 or 14 when the iPhone came out, whereas for them, they might have been 33 when the iPhone came out. And that's an entirely different vantage point. And it gives you a perspective, a macro perspective on the world that younger people just don't have, because they grew up with screens in their hands. And you need that. In our culture, we're very much we talk, like in Tamil culture, there's always this thing of respecting your elders. The reason you respect your elders is because the world happens in cycles. Like the same way the rise of the internet and social media, I guarantee many older people would have been able to tell that that was going to be dangerous for their kids. That was going to be dangerous for young people. But the thing is, those voices weren't heard by the government, by big tech companies, by the people who could have made a difference. When it comes to this technological revolution, it's important that every single voice at the table is heard, because once you go forward with AI, it's Pandora's box. You do not go backwards. Once we have AI-driven companies, you don't suddenly go back to employing humans. Once AIs can rent humans, you don't suddenly go to, humans renting AI. These things are in a relative level. There's a relative level of permanence there, because the changes can end up really redefining what it means to be human in this world. But we're going to talk about economic readiness, because I could go on about the human stuff forever. Now, the economic readiness piece is key, because these terms are things I really want you to understand. So skill liquidity. When you think about liquidity, it's generally talked about in terms of cash, right? But I want you to think about skill liquidity. What skills do you have that are relevant no matter the role you're doing? This could be your communication, your relationship building. It could be your ability to read quickly and conceptualize things. It could be your quantitative reasoning, your ability to do maths or data analysis. These are liquid skills. When someone says to me, I'm a lawyer and I know law, like that is not a very liquid skill, because if I put that lawyer into a sales position, they might really struggle. But like the point is, sales is a very liquid skill. You can sell swimming pools, you can sell horses, you can sell cars, you can sell anything. And the point is skill liquidity is a real advantage. So think about those base level things. Leverage awareness. So this means that you are aware of the types of leverage you have. So your life experiences, but also how can AI multiply that? What networks exist? I was on a webinar the other day when I was talking, and one of the learners told me about Mumsnet. And I didn't know about Mumsnet because like I'm not a mum, right? And for me, they were talking about how Mumsnet is a great place to find SME clients. I would have not known that had I not had that conversation. But as I'm sure people on this call are mums, how do you leverage a network like that and use AI to build what you're trying to build? Economic agency. This isn't easy when you are currently unemployed or you're currently on universal credit or anything like that. But how do you build economic agency? It means simple things, living below your means. It means simple things, meaning structuring your assets or structuring what you currently own. It's also redefining what assets mean. Things like intellectual property. You have ideas in your brain that are worth money. You can build things that might seem crazy to you now, could be a jingle for a TV ad, and that could be worth money over time. the point is that those are choices. Once you understand that the amount of value you have in your brain from your life experiences, your professional experiences, and your academic experiences can be mobilized to essentially create resource for you. But economic agency is your ability to control that day to day. And the one thing I would say is you set the limits in your mind, right? Anyone here could go or use AI to find about all the SMEs in their local area, start selling them AI consulting services tomorrow, teach them how to use a chat GPT or Gemini or whatever else, charge them 50 quid an hour and start to grow your thing. And the thing I'd advise is a lot of this just comes from deciding to take action. Finally, adaptive identity. In some ways, the most important. And the reason that it's the most important, our identities can really hold us back. You know, me having gone to prison, there were two ways I could view that experience. I could go, shit, I went to prison. People are going to judge me. I'm going to keep that locked away in the closet. So no, I'm never going to talk about it again, right? Or I could go, that was a very interesting experience. Can't believe I ended up there. I'm going to take my learnings from there and I'm going to use that as a way of speaking about that issue, bearing witness to what had happened in my own life. That is called flexible self-concept. It's this idea that you don't have this fixed sense of self. Some people, I tell them that I went to prison, you should see their response, like they have some visceral shock on their face, right? But then as long as I'm friendly and kind and loving, then it doesn't matter what their initial reaction is. It's understanding that that self-concept I hold is my own and it's flexible, it's fluid. But you have to remember, it's about the market. I've had many a manager and many a colleague tell me, it's not about what you like, it's about what the market likes. The market currently likes interesting things. Clearly, it likes renting humans. AI is renting humans. That's something the market likes. The market likes automating loads of pieces of work. The market really likes AI right now. So how do you as an individual develop your identity so you're constantly evolving, constantly fluid? Because today, to have digital skills or AI skills is just, you don't need a degree to say that, right? I have no formal qualification in AI. I have learned that myself over a decade, and therefore I'm able to teach it to other people. Today, the only qualification you need to tell you that you can do something is to prove that you can do it. And that's the initial starting point. Now, skill liquidity. These core competencies that can adapt to multiple industries. So we talked about sales, we talked about marketing, but also think about meta skills. So meta skills are the skills above the skills, right? So metacognition is something we talk about on our programs. And metacognition is how good are you at thinking about your thinking, right? Sounds a bit crazy to do, but the thing is like, why do you think the way you do? Is it because of the way your mom spoke to you growing up, or the way your dad spoke to you? Or is it about the teachers you had at school who told you what you could and couldn't do? Is it because of the news channels that you watch? You know, think about why you vote the way you do, why you choose the products that you choose. This ability to think about your thinking gives you a layer of detachment that allows you to then see yourself as what you are, which is a human being who has been programmed by their experiences. The same way AIs have been programmed with algorithms and the internet, each of us as human beings have been programmed by the experiences that have imprinted on us. Your ability to separate yourself from that helps you to reach a level of awareness that has economic value. So this allows you to have critical thinking, pattern recognition. If you feel the way you do in your local area, I assure you, you are not the only person who feels that way. Most people who live in a specific area will feel the same as the people around them. And how do you leverage that feeling in a positive way? You know, when you think about parties like Reform, the reason Reform are so powerful is they've managed to galvanize the community spirit in the spirit of politics. And you can use this for good and you can use this for bad. And the point is, it's up to you what you choose to do with those feelings. It's up to you what you choose to do with that insight. Then synthesis, like how can you bring together different experiences? For example, how to be a parent in the age of AI, right? I'm sure there are parents on this call. Like being a parent in the age of AI is different from being a parent in the age of social media or in any other area. And like this type of thinking is key, because the one bit that I think we take for granted as individuals is that we think we can only be a one-trick pony. You think you can just be a HR person, a legal person, a salesperson. Why can't you be a doctor who knows how to run endurance marathons and at the same time is an amazing father or amazing mother? Like those things are synthesizing the human experience into single ways of being. And it's one of the things I would really ask you to start thinking about. Finally, do not collect credentials. Nobody cares about how many certificates anyone has. No one cares about how many degrees people have. People care about what you call capability architecture. Your life can evidence what you do, because even if you're currently unemployed, but you build products on digital products on the side, you can see that. The way I would emphasize this is, think about like a carpenter who's not employed as a carpenter. He just makes things with wood at home. If you went to the carpenter's house, what would you expect to see? You would expect to see loads of wooden, like woodwork idols. Maybe he's building a boat or something like that. That capability architecture is also evidenced online, because you now can go and paint and take a video of it and put it online. You can do a bunch of things. People who exercise and put it online. The same way someone who goes to the gym has the body of a gym goer, the same way someone who can then evidence that on social media makes themselves more aware of it, or makes others more aware of it. Leverage awareness. Now, AI is a multiplier. I don't feel like I have to emphasize. You all know the power that AI has to be able to create automated systems, to take your story, to create multiple versions of it, to create different social media posts, to create sales copy and email copy and newsletters. Those things are key. It takes your individual capacity and multiplies it by 10. But what you have to remember is distribution is your power, because the more people that know about you, whether that's in your local area, on social media, or wherever else, that's what matters in the attention economy. We don't live in an economy where it's purely about money anymore. If you can leverage attention and direct it towards you, money is an afterthought, because money will naturally come to you, because companies want to sponsor people who have a reach, because you're more likely to convince people to buy off them. The time of TV adverts is long gone, right? You know, I remember, sorry, I don't know why, but when I said TV advert, I remember Andrex, the Andrex puppy, right? Like, now the Andrex puppy would have a TikTok account and an Instagram account, and the Andrex puppy would be being posted 10 times a day. And the point is that distribution is the power, right? And you can only really get people to remember you after repetitive impressions. And I would encourage you, like, you know, even the likes of Joe Rogan with his funny podcast, he started, it didn't look that good. Like, it just looked a bit shoddy, right? And what ended up happening was, over time he built that. And that's what you got to think about it like. And one of the beautiful things about, I guess, being English or being British is that our accents are very much favored across the world. Like, if you think about what the British are known for in other markets, is that, you know, very convincing, very persuasive. So how do you leverage that on social media as part of your specific leverage? And then your audience as an asset. So it doesn't matter what your audience is. It could be in person or it could be online. This is something you need to nurture. These relationships are beyond community. If we had to think about how we'd get an announcement out 30 years ago, you'd go to your local church community hall, or you'd go to your local village hall, or you'd go talk to people, and people in person. Now that's done in Facebook groups, Facebook communities, on forums, places like Reddit. Now, what you've got to think is that on these platforms, trust compounds over time. If you just have one post, no one really wants to know you. But if you're a constant value adder, people start to both reward you, they both think you're useful, and then people want to help you. Humans are fundamentally reciprocal beings. You know, we want to help people who've helped us. So, for example, you always go to the shop. One day you tell the shopkeeper to keep the change. Then the next day when you go and you're 20p short, he has no issue going, oh yeah, I'm going to let you off and don't worry about it. That's reciprocity. And humans are like that both online and in person. And you've got to think about how you build that over time. Managing uncertainty is an advantage. People are paid directly in proportional to the amount of uncertainty they can handle. The reason a CEO of a business, or the reason that a government official, whoever, is paid more than someone who just works and has a job within that organization, is because they have to deal with uncertainty that others don't. Now, I can say this myself from running a social enterprise, is like, you know, there's some months where you wake up and you're like, oh, wow, we're going to make payroll this month. And imagine going through a 28-day cycle thinking, damn, are we going to make payroll? Are we going to make next month's payroll? Okay, how do I tell people this? And like, that is the uncertainty that you handle day to day. So what I want you to recognize is, as a species, as human beings across planet Earth, we are all going through the most uncertain period of human history. In many ways, we have technologies that could end society overnight, whether that's AI, whether that's nuclear weapons, whether that's specific countries deciding to do specific things. Uncertainty is now something that we all have to navigate. Now, what I want you to remember is, in a world where we pay people in proportional to that, we have to accept the reality of uncertainty. So accepting that reality means being willing to actually take risks with it. And one of the things I want you to remember is, don't bury your head in the sands with this. The more you learn about things like AI, the more you learn about how this could potentially affect humanity, or how this could potentially affect you and your community, it's really key to helping us navigate it, because people don't know what they don't know, right? And one of the scariest things about not knowing what you don't know is that, while we're here talking about AI, the old lady down the street who has just retired has no idea that her grandchildren need to be thinking about AI. So how do you go tell people? For the younger people in this, like, have you told your parents about AI? Have you spoken about the potential impact it could have on them? And I want to share some links in the chat with you guys for a bunch of different things that you can use to upskill yourself through this. So 3 types of uncertainty. And the things I want you to consider in this is, these types of uncertainty are the only one you can control is identity uncertainty. The rest are going to happen whether we like it or not. So initially, market uncertainty, right? This could be stuff like unemployment rates. This could be stuff like employment patterns. All of these things are things that we can't control, but we can be aware of. Economic cycles, the short-term and long-term debt cycle, how markets move, where recessions are predicted, all of that type of thing. But like us recognizing and thinking, how does market uncertainty affect the wider society, the wider world? There's always tends to be a rise of fascism in times where market uncertainty is increased, right? And we have to see this and really be willing to recognize it and learn about it. Technological uncertainty. A lot of the reasons all of you have been attracted to AI boot camps is because there is technological uncertainty, and you are choosing to be proactive and do something about it, which is more than what most choose to do in the same situation. So again, an admirable quality. But finally, and the most important, is identity uncertainty. This is your psychological response, right? It's how you are okay with changing your sense of self based on what changes. If we were all unemployed tomorrow and put on a universal basic income, how do you make sure that you don't have a mental breakdown, or that doesn't cause you to lose any hope or sense of self, right? How do you start to understand how to navigate this new world? And like your ability to reinvent yourself. Humans have to reinvent themselves many times over a lifetime. You had to do that in school, when you made new groups of friends, or when you went to a different school, or when you went to university, and when you got a job, or from job to job. And it's like recognizing that reinvention capacity exists in each of us, but now more than ever, it requires us to be super duper intentional, because the intentional nature of it is because this is happening to us and all of us are going through it together. And I think it's one of the first times in human history where the majority of humanity, like Pratik likes to call it the 99%, and I get it, because it is the 99% of humanity who aren't tech billionaires, who aren't tech politicians, or are politicians or whoever else, are experiencing this change. And we're going, what does this mean for us as people? And I would encourage you to remember this as a global perspective. We in the UK are very, very lucky. 49% of the world do not have access to basic technology. Something like 65% of the world live on less than $7 a day. So we in the UK are unbelievably privileged. We aren't where we could experience a lot of technological uncertainty. Our government will probably be the first to have a universal basic income. We'll be one of the first to develop some of the support structures we are required, I guess, depending on the political party that holds the seat when that happens. But the point is that we are very lucky human beings to exist on this planet. And it's recognizing that within your own identity. The adaptability stack. Now, recognizing that these things, these layers, are key, because emotional regulation is your ability to regulate yourself under pressure. It's usually one of the biggest determinants of like how you navigate intense situations. Volatility is going to be natural, but the way I went to a 10-day silent meditation retreat 2 years ago, and the concept they called it is equanimity, right? Someone pisses you off, someone makes you really, really, really angry. How long does it take you to get back to baseline? Does it take you 3 days? Does it take you 2 hours, 1 hour, half an hour? The point is, if you are emotionally regulated, you don't get that angry. You might be angry for a minute and then you come back to normal. A great way to test people's emotional regulation is travel with them or drive with them. The person who just gets angry and flips people off on the road probably has poor emotional regulation. Someone who gets annoyed by airport delays, again, emotional regulation is generally the issue there. So how do we stop ourselves responding with volatility? Rapid experimentation. You don't have to be a scientist to experiment. You can experiment in your own life, right? People who do dry January, that's experimentation. They've seen that drinking can sometimes spiral. So they're like, okay, I'm going to go sober for a month, see how I feel. Some people do that and then they end up being sober for years. And the thing I would ask you to encourage you to think about, in rapid experimentation is you want to test your assumptions as quickly as possible and you want to be wrong. People are often so attached to their idea of being right. So confirmation bias is a real thing, right? It's the reason misinformation spreads the way it does, is because everyone wants to be right. So because your uncle told you that something is okay, say for example, I don't know, your uncle told you that the Epstein files are fake, yeah? And now you're Googling vigorously for the Epstein files to be fake. Now you're suddenly there going, Uncle Bob told me that the Epstein files are fake, so it must be true. And you found 10 blog articles that tell you that they're fake and they're a deep state conspiracy. And now suddenly you're on a different wavelength to the rest of the planet. And the point is that rapid experimentation requires you to want to falsify your own beliefs. And humans are very bad at not believing what they want to believe. So how often do you challenge your beliefs? Next, signal detection. Understanding there are signals in the world, right? Right now, the government investing so much money in AI, tech companies investing so much money in AI, government funding boot camps like the ones we're on. These are signals for genuine shifts in society. What do you choose to do with that? The thing is, some people are sensitive to signals. I meet people every day who refuse to use AI. I meet people who literally say, I don't think AI is going to take my job. Like, AI is useless. AI can't do this, this, and this. And I'm like, literally need to use the tools, and they're like, oh no, like I've used it doesn't work. And the point is, how do you support those people who are on that journey? But then this also contributes to your own adaptability and finding decision velocity. So I think Barack Obama said this. He was like, you have to be okay making decisions with like 40% of the information. And that's the reality we live in. You will never have 99% certainty, and if you choose to wait for 99% certainty to act, you will always fail, because nothing is 99% certain. It's like if I go to people and I say, I don't know how many people here were like teenagers or in their 20s in the 90s, right? But if someone came to you and said, okay, the internet, this thing called the internet is going to be massive and you should become a software engineer, would you have taken their advice? And if you wouldn't have taken their advice, why not, right? These are the types of questions to ask yourself in hindsight, right? And that type of thinking helps you to understand why your decision velocity now needs to be much faster, because, the internet took a decade and a bit to really catch on. AI has taken literally years. There's like exponential curves for how these technologies were adopted. AI is literally a straight line. So most of them are like this. So smartphones were like that. Internet was like that. Like you see other technologies like AI is literally like this, the adoption curve. It took 5 days to reach 100 million people. It's very, very different to any previous existing technology. So anti-fragility is a concept by Nassim Taleb. He writes extensively about that. And the point of it is to recognize is life shocks are inevitable. Life is going to get fucked no matter what we try to do. We could build 100 different ways of preventing that. We could be billionaires with bunkers in New Zealand and our lives will get messy, right? Again, like, sorry, the Epstein files are in my mind, but like Bill Gates, right? Multi-billionaire, has more money than anything in the world, has more power than anything in the world, but he's still affected by a life shock. And the point is like, you as an individual want to think not just about surviving shocks. It's not just about coming out punching. It's about making sure that that volatility strengthens you. So every time you go through something difficult, you experience a health scare, an employment scare, a financial scare, some form of difficulty, it builds more strength, more resilience. Think about it like a tree. When wind blows on a tree, the roots become firmer, the trunk becomes stronger, it becomes more stable as a result. And you want to think about this through the variety of skills you're developing as well as revenue streams. So for example, one of the industries that's massively growing right now is coaching and therapy. Why is coaching and therapy growing? Because in a more isolated world where humans are spending more time on their screens, especially young people, we are now lonelier than ever. So people are paying for that human connection, in essence. We're going to need an army of therapists and an army of coaches to support people through the fundamentally largest transition we're seeing in human history. So you're going to have to sit with people to go, how do you feel about being unemployed? How do you feel about not being able to work in your sector anymore and losing that job of 20 years? And that's how you benefit from disorder and rapid change, because you're constantly not thinking about I just want peace and I just want safety, you're constantly building for the opposite. And there's a really nice quote, I don't know, it's Japanese or Chinese, where it's better to be a warrior in a garden than it is to be a gardener in a war, right? And I really want you to think about what that means, right? The warrior in the garden, he's chilling. He's literally just going, I'm planting plants, cutting bushes, watering the plants. But the gardener in the war is going to probably die. And the point is you want to have that framing towards your day-to-day life, because you need to recognize that things aren't always going to be stable. They aren't always going to be peaceful. How do you adapt throughout that? So here's a chance to have some reflection for 5 minutes. Two questions, you can answer either one. So question one, if your role disappeared tomorrow, what remains? What capabilities are truly yours? And what would you recognize as your capability stack? And if AI commoditized your current skill, what's your next move? And what's one layer deeper than that move that you were going to make? Okay, we will feel free to reflect on this, and feel free to think about it, answer it. Again, one of these things, the reason I ask these questions is more because it's important to reflect on what you're learning as you're taking it in. People can know too much, and when you know too much, it can often paralyze you without taking action. And my advice to you all is just take action on what you're doing. Now, understanding, so recognizing that you need to build a relationship with risk before you're okay with building a business. Most people build businesses and they don't go anywhere because they haven't developed a relationship with risk yet. They haven't recognized that everything has a cost. So, for example, you could build a business for 10 years and it could fail tomorrow. Many a CEO, many an entrepreneur who have gone through that, but they are okay with it because their relationship isn't necessarily with the business, it's with the risk that they're taking. Higher risk equals higher reward. Doesn't matter where in society you look at that. You know, if you think about a footballer could earn millions, but that's survivorship bias, right? Because most footballers or kids who want to be footballers never make it. And it's the same in music, or it's the same anywhere. But building that relationship with risk starts from now. It doesn't start later on in your journey. People are never ready for that. And the point is like, you want to go through that recognizing what do you intend to do. So your purpose, and you know, you can think about this through the Ikigai framework, or just simply like, what do you do with your life when you're under no obligation to do anything? You know, those kids who went into gaming and making YouTube videos about gaming, they thrived because they loved gaming. They knew gaming got them up in the morning. So they then went and used that as what drove their decisions. And that clarity of intent is why you will succeed or why you will fail, because people need to know what it is you want to do. One of the biggest difference between Breakthrough and other AI skills providers is we're not here just to tell you about the tools. Like, I believe you can go learn about AI tools anywhere on the internet, but it's learning about the thinking, the way of being as a human being in this current environment that will give you that advantage. Because everyone knows how to post on social media, but only 1% of those people become creators. Why is that? Because the fundamental mindsets and attributes behind a creator are very different to just being able to post on social media. Next, and again, in some ways, most importantly, do you have economic runway? And if you don't have economic runway, how do you build it? Now, if you're currently unemployed and you are on universal credit, you can have up to 2 years to experiment on a self-employment idea or to test out entrepreneurship. Take advantage of that government contribution to your entrepreneurial journey. I have friends who, like, they were on universal credit, they were unemployed, built a business during that 2-year period and really thrived beyond that because they were able to figure out how to get that economic runway. But be creative. There are a number of schemes out there, grants that you can access both in your local area and on a wider national level to build what you want to build. Now, your skill stack positioning. How rare, valuable, and difficult to replicate are you? You know, once I was on a call earlier today, and the lady was telling me about how everyone's an AI trainer today, right? And I agree. I think everyone is trying to be an AI trainer, but how do you become someone who's entirely different in that sphere or in that market? So that could be something like, how do you build, for example, you could be a young person from a global majority background in a local area like Norfolk. And, you know, how do you talk about it in context of rural communities? How do you talk about it in the context of your specific niche? So, for example, farmers, like who's teaching farmers how to use robotics and AI or drones? Or who's teaching people who have coastal tourism businesses? That type of rare, valuable, and difficult to replicate positioning is what works in the market. And finally, energy management. You know, business is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And one of the things that I have time and time again, I learn is that I can't literally push myself to sprint every single day. So you have to remember, Naval Ravikant has a lovely quote, and it's play long-term games with long-term people. Business is a 10-year plus game that you're going to play. Anything worth achieving will take time. So how do you ensure that you manage yourself through that period? And that will be the thing that determines your success, being able to go through it in the long term. The identity shift I want you guys to have through this is, employees are in some way, shape, or form incentivized by these things. They're compliance orientated. They follow rules. They need to follow rules to keep their job. They have security through the institution of their employer. They have the security through the institution of whether that employer is the government, a private sector, or third sector organization. They tend to avoid risk because risk could mean they lose their job. Risk could mean that they lose that monthly paycheck. They're dependent. I think there's like a quote where it says, give a human a regular paycheck, regular entertainment, and regular food, and they will give up on chasing their wildest dreams. And it's true, right? I, as a CEO of a business, will tell you for free, I much preferred having a job. It was so much safer, so much easier month to month. Like I never had to worry going, oh, is payroll going to happen? Because I knew payroll wasn't my responsibility. And that key thinking was different. But the rewards of running a business are 100 times anything I would have ever gotten as an employee. And they're permission seeking. So permission seeking is, you ask your manager, is this the right decision? Like, should I do this? Is it okay if I do this? Can I take a holiday? Can I do this? Can I do that? And that permission seeking thing can really hold people back. Now, to builders, what is the difference between a builder? And a builder is one of those online terms that is used loads to talk about people who have a lot of agency online. They just build things. They don't ask for permission. They make things happen. If you want to read more about that, the High Agency article is actually a great place to start. And I will share 2 other books in the chat while I am talking. But the next thing is, capability is where they get their security from. So recognizing that capability is, okay, can't share it in the chat. I'm gonna have to share it with you guys afterwards. Capability comes from them building those skills, evidencing them over time. Strategic risk taking is being able to discern when it's a good risk versus a bad risk. And sometimes you have to take bad risks to get to the good risks. It's all about learning. The ownership mindset is going, I own my outcomes. I own my state in life. This is the reason my life is the way it is right now. And I'm going to do these things to change it. And autonomous decision making, you realize you can just do what you want. Within the younger generation, there's like a really big thing with building law. I don't know whether anyone's heard this, like on TikTok or anything like that. I don't know if you know anyone has TikTok here, but yeah, law, right? Building law. There's a guy who randomly decided one week that he was going to walk from Manchester to Kenya, and he's on like day 60 of his journey. And he just woke up one day and went, yeah, fuck it, I'm going to walk from the UK to Kenya. And he went off on a walk. And I think you have to remember is you have free will. We all have free will. Like, even we have responsibilities, we have life experiences, we have what's going on in our lives, but we can choose to do things differently today. And we are autonomous in that. So recognizing your autonomy is so key to being able to take advantage of the opportunities at hand. So your one-page adaptive business model. And like, this is the one thing I want you to think is, nowadays, a business plan, you might need it to get funding or whatever else, but I would like you to simplify things so you can start to take action sooner. Businesses exist to solve problems, right? And the key thing is what is the problem you want to solve? And you want to think about this. It could be a problem of your own that you've solved, and then you could go out and do it. If you've quit smoking and you know how to quit smoking, that means you can advise other people on how to quit smoking. So how do you help other people do that? Through social media content, through groups, through sessions, however it is. But it needs to use your capabilities. Say, for example, if you're a really good videographer and you instead say, I'm going to start public speaking about smoking. So that was a funny little Freudian slip. The point is like, you want to remember that your unique skill stack will be applied there. So if you're a videographer, make social media videos. Don't bother trying to be a public speaker. And that kind of awareness of your unfair advantage is so key. We all have unfair advantages. For example, I always say, if I was telling people about parents, how they should be adapting towards AI, I would have way less understanding because I'm just not a parent. So that is something that's key to recognizing where you fit. Distribution. Your distribution doesn't need to be a social media audience. It can be having a following on a forum. It could be your local group that you belong to, your local, I don't know, I signed up for pickleball recently, pickleball club. It's an American game, random thing. But the point is your distribution could just be people you know. There's a really funny show I was watching on Netflix where this lady was selling handbags to her Mormon church. And I was like, oh, damn, her Mormon church was her distribution. So really think about this as in like, what distribution do you have access to? Monetization. How do you turn value to money? It's the thing that people struggle with the most. Oftentimes when people haven't been in business, they don't know how to just say, this costs £50. If you want to use it, it's going to cost you £50, and negotiate, right? Ask for money and learn to sell. That is one thing that I think is massively underrated. We sell all day, every day. Every time you convince your kid to go to bed on time, you convince your partner to go on a date. Every time you convince an employer to give you a job, that is all sales. If you can bring that together and think sales is just communication and relationship building, it becomes much easier to then figure out how to, kids are really good at sales. They have no shame, right? They'll go up to their mums or dads and be like, Mommy, I want £20, right? Think about as adults, we feel so grimy to go up to someone and go, by the way, this service costs 50 quid and it's an hour long. And sometimes bringing that childlike mindset can be really helpful. And then think about your leverage. Spoken loads about AI systems and automation, but also the leverage you have as a human being. I'm going to whiz through the last 2 slides because we've got 3 minutes. Iteration over perfection. You will never, ever get things perfect. No matter how hard you try, perfection is an illusion. There's no such thing as perfection in our reality, so don't look for it. Just iterate. Improve it from a V1 to a V1.1, 1.2, and so on. Signal testing. Make sure you validate assumptions. You might have all the hypotheses in the world, and they could be all entirely wrong. Remember, once upon a time, people thought the earth was flat and the world ended at Spain. So the point is that you've got to remember that assumptions get proven wrong all the time. So what are you doing to test your assumptions? And check your ego at the door. Business will trample over your ego faster than anything else, because you will spend days wanting to have a mental breakdown. You will have days where you just want to give up and throw in the towel. So recognize that your ego is your enemy. Compounding assets, your audience, intellectual property, systems, anything that builds value over time. My favorite asset there that's not mentioned is relationships. Your relationships are so powerful. They are the #1 asset in a world. In a world where we don't have jobs, we have universal basic income. Relationships will be the currency of the future, because it's who you know and how you know them that determines how you will then work together with people. And this is the point. It's not just to build a business. There's no such thing as business skills. Like, I really dislike, I hated business A level at school. And it was like one of the things I learned more and more, profit, loss, revenue, they're all important. But the point is, you're building a structure. An organization is just a group of people making something happen. A church is an organization. A government is an organization. A business is an organization. The local Scouts and Cubs is an organization, right? The point is, bringing people together, creating a structure and allowing it to evolve is the thing that you need to look for. Finally, you need to build freedom in your lives. Freedom comes from structure. It doesn't come without it. People think that being free is having no rules and unlimited resources. That's fundamentally a prison of its own making. You have to recognize that you have to build your way there. So audit your own readiness. Spend some time today reflecting on where have you been going right, where have you been going wrong, and think about those things: skill, liquidity, economic leverage. I'll share the slides in the chat so you guys have access to them, and I will make sure you guys can view them. And then just, have a review of it and a thing. Identify one leverage skill that you can do, use AI for, or that you can do that has skill liquidity, and build from the inside out. Foundations first, and then think about your strategy. You need to build the basics of what you're going to do. Talk to a customer, do some research on the customer. And finally, last but not least, because I do have a call to jump off to, the system rewards compliance and the future rewards builders. We have to remember that right now we're trying to get everyone to fit into that same box. The job centers incentivized to tell everyone to get a job or do something that reduces their burden. The government's worried about unemployment. But you need to recognize, what are you building? What is the future you're building? What are you contributing to for the rest of humanity? And with that lovely note, guys, I am going to have to jump off.